Welcome everyone, I'm Dr. Sam Spinelli, physical therapist and strength and conditioning coach with Sissy Athletics. Today we're going to be going through some variations of a movement that are going to help you build up some strong quads, making your knees more robust and resilient, while also giving you a stronger core. Pretty much, it's a fantastic option for most people. As well, it's a versatile exercise that can be done at home or at a gym depending upon some of the equipment options that you have. So before we get into this exercise, if you could hit that like button down below, it helps us out a ton. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe. The variations that we're going to look at today are all around the Sissy squat. For those that are newer to the channel, we did a recent video on the Sissy squat, discussing why it's an awesome exercise, why it's a safe exercise, and also giving you a lot of progressions on how to be able to get up to the movement if you aren't currently able to do it. So I'll link that down in the description box below for anyone that hasn't seen that video yet, because it's an excellent resource. Now, as awesome as that video was, it didn't really show you any ways that you could progress the movement or begin adding an additional load. So if you're someone who is a bit stronger and the regular Sissy squat isn't sufficiently challenging for you, which is honestly a lot of people, then this video is going to help give you lots of ways that you can start to progress the movement depending upon the equipment that you have and the exact way that you're trying to get benefit out of the movement. So let's get into our first option. The first variation that we're going to look at is the one dumbbell hand supported Sissy squat. In this version, we hold a dumbbell down by our side while executing the movement. If you're at home without dumbbells, you can use any kind of extra load like a backpack or a water jug. It's best to start light and get comfortable with the movement before adding significant load. But for those who are more proficient with it, you can definitely work up heavier. I personally use a 24 kilo kettlebell and it lit me up. While this is a good way to make it more challenging, you need to consider that it does preference one leg over the other. Whichever leg is on the side holding the weight will get worked slightly harder since you're resisting rotating that direction and have the weight on that side. So you can either split up your sets doing half your reps on each side, or doing one set with it in one hand and then the other set with it in the other hand. Either way, just try to distribute it about even. Now moving on to our second variation, we're going to take the weight from down by our side and bring it up top. This is going to be the one arm rack hand supported Sissy squat. Here we set up the same, but instead of the dumbbell at the side, we bring it up to our chest. You can do this with a dumbbell or a kettlebell. Personally, this is one of my favorite options for loading the movement. Setting up this way is actually harder than the last one because the weight ends up being further away from our access point, making the moment arm longer and the same weight feel even harder. Similar to the last movement, you do end up having the problem where one leg gets worked slightly more than the other. So you want to factor that in during your training and split up your sets appropriately. If you are able to hold your weight closer to your midline, basically over the center of your chest, then this is less of an issue compared to the last variation though, which makes it a better option for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to notice with this variation that it can be more trunk demanding than the prior one. So for individuals that are trying to really just emphasize their legs, you might benefit from going with the previous option more. Now our next variation moves away from using a dumbbell or kettlebell and goes to using a band. And this is going to be the band supported Sissy squat. With this version, we place a band under the ball of our feet and then loop it up in front of our shoulders and then behind our neck. The band is a really good loading option for a lot of people who aren't very comfortable going deep in the movement with load just yet, as it'll pull more at the top and less in the bottom position. Since the band is in front of your shoulders and behind your neck, you shouldn't have a problem. Just make sure to not run it in front of your neck as you go down, otherwise it's going to be a choking hazard. You want to go through and execute the movement the same way, and just let the band slide in front of your shoulders. For those people that are looking to have a variation that's going to be a little bit more challenging than the band version, then we can consider shifting over and using a landmine. In this first landmine variation that we're going to look at, we're going to be facing the anchor point. You're going to set up with the barbell anchored down low and then have the barbell at your chest in a goblet grip. Then you'll go through the same Sissy squat motion that we discussed. What's cool about this is that if you stand further back, the landmine essentially just acts more like a core challenging hand support than much resistance. But as you move your feet closer towards the anchor point and your knees go forward and your torso keeps going backwards, you'll get significantly more challenged by the resistance. This can be an extremely core challenging version of the Sissy squat. You can play around with letting your hips bend too and making it more of a heel elevated goblet squat if you want to try to emphasize your legs or you're just struggling with the demands on your trunk. Now we can just flip around and do a second variation with the landmine. With this back-facing anchor point version, we're going to set up the same, but again with our back towards the anchor point and have the end of the bar on one shoulder. It can be helpful to have a plate on the bar to have your shoulder push against for more support. Then you can play around with your foot distance. With the last version, it really challenges the core, whereas this puts more emphasis on the quads. You can play around with the amount of hip bend that you have, or even letting your feet come back down flat on the ground and making it more of like a hack squat. Our next variation ditches the weights and goes with a bodyweight version that is extremely challenging. This is going to be the split squat, sissy squat. Here we set up in a slightly longer split squat and then lean back and go through a sissy squat type motion with the back leg, and the front leg more for support. What I like a lot about this one is that it can be really challenging without needing any additional weight. You can obviously add more resistance, but usually you can just stick with the standard option and adjust your foot position to increase the loading on that single leg. For anyone that wants to add additional weight, you can either hold a dumbbell down by your side like we discussed before, or one at your chest. And then our next sissy squat variation takes this to the next level and looks at the single leg sissy squat. For this variation, a hand support is pretty critical because otherwise you're going to probably struggle more with balance than actually working your legs to a significant degree. The other added bonus with the hand support is that as you go down and you find that you're struggling in the bottom position, you can use your hand assistance to start to help you up. This makes it a great option as you start to work on progressing the eccentric motion and then getting assistance on the concentric. Typically, individuals aren't going to need additional weight for this, but if you're a savage, you can definitely add extra weight if that's needed. And then the eighth and final variation that we're going to look at today is the barbell sissy squat. Most of the variations we went through today are hand supported because it's going to generally accommodate the best loading and least relative demand on balance. However, some people want to be absolute beasts and able to crush this movement with weight and balance well. A great example of this is Julian Smith, a bodybuilder who crushes impressive sissy squats with a barbell. To do this, we set up with a barbell in our hands behind our back, and then we do the freestanding sissy squat. Like I mentioned, the balance demand is pretty high, so for most people, it's better off getting strong and comfortable with this movement with other variations, and then working to this one when you feel like you're more comfortable with the movement overall. And that's 8 variations of the sissy squat that's going to help you progress your quad strength to the next level. Now again, if you haven't seen the first video where we discussed the general technique and a progression on how to do this movement, I would really suggest that you check that out before jumping into these more advanced variations. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that like button down below. It helps us out a ton. And we'll see you in the next video.